Hello and welcome to AILTV, also known as Africans in London TV. We are back. See, here at AILTV, we've been discussing matters concerning Africa for a long time. And we don't just discuss, we analyze, digest, and then we make up our minds and give you the correct information to you who are watching. And we are back with Africa Update. And I have got experts in African affairs. So I don't want to spend so much time. I'm going to introduce you to my guest. No, but before I introduce you to my guest, in this video, we are going to be talking about the Sahel. In fact, we are going to dwell on Traore because Traore now is the world star. But before we get there, I wanted to give a little bit a little bit of a background. We want to know where is Traore coming from and in which region of Africa is situated. We are going to be talking about the Sahel. Now, before I dive into all that, let me show you this. The Sahel is a very big area. 3,053,000, that is 3,000,000 532 kilometers, and it has got 10 countries. Population wise is 181 million, but there is something that is misleading. I can see Nigeria in the Sahel. Nigeria alone is 200 million. So these statistics sometimes they mislead, but if you take away Nigeria, the Sahel region is 181 million. So I believe that I have cleared out that. Now, let me introduce you to my guests. So, on this program today, as I've said, I've got experts in everything Africa, counter-terrorism, security. These guys have it. They know it all. In fact, they will be talking about all this later on. Sometimes I'm just going to keep quiet and listen to these guys talk because they know what they're talking about. So, on depending how you're looking at, on the side here, I've got Alex Akoman. Alex Akoman is a security and he's a political analyst, but he's also a lecturer. And then I have got Temitope Olodo, the guy who knows that area inside out. Let me say so. If I'm right or if I'm wrong, you will correct me. So, gentlemen, what we are going to do, we for the first 20 minutes, we want to talk about give us the background of the Sahel and what it represents. So, let me start with you, Temi, because
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me, and it's a great honor to be on the same platform with Mr. Alex, who is all familiar to our audience in his areas of expertise. I would like to look at the Sahel from more of how the people are viewing it at the moment and how the world is seeing the Sahel. As we all know, there is an humanitarian and developmental crisis in the Sahel. You've shown us the map, but looking at the beautiful map does not really tell the real sadness of what is happening on the ground, which of course includes that over 7 million people are displaced across the Sahel due to conflict. More than 30 million people require humanitarian assistance, according to the OCHA 2024. And because of the issue of the climate change, there is conflict that is now becoming cross-border challenge. But to top that up was the decision of those three or four countries, as you call them, Mali, Niger, all deciding to exit ECOWAS, creating a diplomatic challenge, for the bloc, and moving away from uh, the Western countries that were their allies in the past to ally now with Russia, creating or recreating the Cold War challenges that we've always been used to. But there is no doubt the population of the Sahel have sympathy with some of their leaders because of the way they've been treated by France. So let's not, you know, try and you know ice that or try and get away from that. Bad governance, the way in which the issue have been political issues have been dealt with or have been, you know, demonstrated, has more or less led people to call for military, you know, have sympathy with the military uh, leaders, as we call them. But that, of course, does not excuse the fact that military rule should be an issue of the past in Africa. But I will leave that for conversation later. But the main conversation here is that what that young man is doing, you know, in his country in Burkina Faso, how people are viewing it, and the internet narrative of the whole issue that is happening in the Sahel. That is the issue of debate, and that is what we need to analyze to see: is there any truth in it? Is it just, an uh, internet overblown, achievement, or is it something that is really happening on the ground?
Okay, so Alex, what is your take?
Yes,
Sahel first. Give us a background. You are from Cote d'Ivoire.
yes. Thank you, and thank you, Joe. Thank you, Temi. It's a pleasure for me to be here today and share this platform with you guys. Africa is our home, even though we are not currently living in Africa, but we still are connected to our homeland.
Yes.
So, when you're talking about the Sahel region, it covers the area from Mauritania, Mali, Burkina, Niger, Chad, Sudan to the Red Sea. So
Yes.
from the west to the east of Africa. Now, roughly speaking, this is a desertic area, and we don't have forests. We just had savannas and also no vegetation for some countries. But what you need to understand is that this region is very rich. This region from Mauritania to Sudan is very rich. And just not to mention few ones, you have oil, gold, you know, you have oil massively produced in Niger, Mali, Sudan. You have also petrol, gas, and then uranium, which is used for electricity and many other um, benefits. Now, this area covers West African countries as well as East African countries. And what has happened in the last 10, 15 years is the chaos created by NATO by attacking and destroying Libya, killing the leader, created a mayhem in Libya where security issues not only became a problem for Libya, but also so many rebels, so many people who were hired to go to war against Gaddafi after the death of Gaddafi. All these different groups spread across the African continent. And that's why we started having terrorism activities in Mali, in Burkina, in Niger, and further down in Chad as well. Now, the Western countries and African countries work together to have some support for the Malian government, for instance. And we had various organizations, including the UN, the EU, different countries sent the military, were based in Mali, trying to help the Malian government to address this threatening issue. So from 20, Gaddafi was killed in 2011. So from 2012 up till the coup in Mali in 2020, Mali had on its soil different contingent of militaries from European background, from American, and they occupied different parts in Mali. But for over 10 years, they were based in Mali. Before the terrorists invaded the country, the government were controlling over 40, 60, 70% of the territory. But after 10 years of the foreign military being in Mali, the terrorists progressed and were the government was only controlling less than 30% of the country.
Okay, so
Now,
pause there, pause there. We will come back. We will come back because we have now. Let me go to Temi here. Temi, you know when I hear Alex saying all these the facts that is given,
Yeah.
it seems that Africa is never ready. It sounds like Africa can never fight or can never liberate itself. In fact, we will even come to maybe a little bit of the African Union, which I feel it has failed. Do you really think that Africa cannot get its act together? Look, if we are saying let us unite, why can't Nigeria send army? Why can't Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania? Why can't we just get armies from those countries, African countries, to go there? Tell me, please.
Okay. I see where you're coming from, and it's important to put down a bit of a historical context to some of our conversation. We all know the story of Sergeant Joe, I think is his name, in
Sergeant
Ivory.
Joe,
Yeah,
Sierra Leone, I think so.
yes,
Yeah?
Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast. We know the role that Nigerian played, and ECOMOG force, as they call them, and even when Yaya, I think that's his name in Gambia, was refusing to go, and Nigeria got involved. It helped to change to ensure that the civilian regime was able to get into post. So West Africa has actually shown and created a model for other regions to emulate and actually look up to. But unfortunately, that is not the case with what is going on in the Sahel at the moment, because these particular individuals were kicking against a bit of ungoverned space, challenges with providing equipment for them to fight the insurgency that was going on. That's with the military. The military was having problem with that. Meanwhile, they were seeing their politicians enjoying themselves, and the colonial master exercising rights in their country and taking away their resources. And that created a sentiment within the population. So the military will not have actually have a foothold if the political processes were effective. Whether we like it or not, the truth has to be told that the military got foothold because of the way in which the politicians have collided or worked with the West to continue to impoverish their people. So we know that some of those countries in the Sahel were very quick to adopt even the I said the ECOWAS currency. They were trying to move away from France imperial uh, handicap on them or stronghold on them. But yet, France was not letting go. And this was creating resentment on the ground. People were getting really, really angry. And you could see that even countries like Nigeria were even having concerns as of last year about military interference, to the extent that the military leadership had to come out to say, no, there's not going to be any military interference, because people are just fed up with politicians that only think about themselves and family only. That is
Okay.
where the problem
Okay.
is.
Okay. So, Alex,
Yes.
we know. I just want you. We have got only a few minutes on this segment here.
Okay.
That you see, it looks like, as I've said earlier, Africa seems never ready, and in that we are always chained in an invisible chains. Temi has just mentioned about France. Um, this culture of dependency, do you think now these military guys, because we are going now to go into that, because then we will find out, do you really think that they might actually crack it? Because if Traore has kicked out France, Simi Goita has done the same, I think all those military leaders are actually gearing up to that. Just give us your take on that. Then we move on to another segment where we are going to talk about these military leaders and the support they are getting from the public.
Thank you very much. And like I was saying earlier, within Africa, obviously we had few different imperialist countries who colonized Africa. Now, the French countries, compared to the British and the others, up till today, in 2025, today, they are not independent. Let me just give you a few examples. France still have military base in Abidjan, in Ivory Coast, in Senegal, Dakar, in Gabon, in Chad. So if you take a country which is not capable of managing its own security, it's quite clear that that country is not or should not be even considered as a country. It's just a region of that country who's controlling that country militarily. Secondly, we don't have currencies. All the French speaking countries from Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, Burkina, up to the Central African countries speaking French, often altogether around 15, 16 countries, they use and they are still currently using a currency which is a French property, okay? And that currency is made in France and is controlled by France. Now, for these currencies, Ivorians, Malians, Senegalese, everything we produce in these French speaking countries are like French product. So financially, economically, we are not independent because our economy is managed by France. And then you look at every aspect of life in these countries within the French uh, environment, there's no freedom. We are still not independent. Now, with the free leaders coming up in these free French countries, speaking countries, we can see that the speeches are changing because they're talking about being capable of managing their own affairs without relying on somebody else or any other country. That's why the Malian leaders is after 10 years of observing how the country was collapsing, basically, the military were always on the front, defending the country. but they see that the leaders were not doing much for the population. They took things into their hands and then they overthrew the leader who was elected, Ibeka. Okay? Now,
Okay.
from the Malian experience, okay,
Hmm. Yeah.
because international forces were based in Mali, and after 10 years, they have not been able to address the terrorism issues, and Malians were not free. So the military decided to take matter in their own hand. And since the military took over, security, if you look at the statistics in
Okay. We
Mali,
will come. We will come.
has
We are going to that. We are going to that part now. We are going.
good.
But tell me just quickly. I just want you to maybe just highlight this. What is Nigerians' game? Because I can see Nigeria is causing up with France, and while everybody else is trying to run away from France, Tinubu is causing up with what's going on?
And I think that's a $1 million question because nobody really understands the uh, cozy relationship that seems to be happening between the current Nigerian government and France. Now, I have challenges with Nigeria even having closer relationship with Niger because I feel okay, they got uranium, that's fine, but we were even going to put a train that crossed between from Nigeria to Niger, and I was totally against that because I just feel that this is a country that has a very very bad humanitarian index, you know, and very low illiteracy level. They got terrorism challenges, you know, and I just felt like we're more or less going to export terrorism from those countries, full stop. Even though there is economic gain from helping them to take their product to the sea because they are locked, landlocked countries, I still feel that what we were doing was not right. Now, our movement with France, I cannot understand for the God of for the you know understand the reason why we are moving close to France. France, as far as I'm concerned, is a broke country. It's a superpower but broken. You know, is it technology? Is it that they're coming with their nuclear to help us with electricity? What is it that France want to give us? Because there's a serious language barrier. So anything they bring to us, let's look at it, which is part of the problem in Nigeria at the moment. Nigeria has weapons from so many countries. In order for you to use those weapons effectively, you need to get the expertise of those countries to come and translate it down to a language that your rank and file could understand. So I don't understand. Is it French weapons that we want to start using? Or is it their nuclear that we want, their French companies that we want to come over? I don't understand it. So there is a serious issue here. It doesn't make sense. Of course, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have bilateral relationship with a country that doesn't speak a language that we fully understand or that is spoken by less than 2% of the Nigerian population. But I don't see any benefit from our relationship, serious benefit from our relationship with France. What I would have loved to see is more relationship, you know, between African countries. I would have loved to see us going to Ivory Coast and saying the top rich people in Ivory Coast should come and maybe invest in Nigeria, the one from Ghana, the one from Kenya. Let's start investing in each other country because our inter-investment within Africa is only 30%. And look at what Trump is doing, hijacking, is it hijack or entrapping the president of South Africa, and that, so I know that's not the topic for today, but who is the next African leader going there that is going to be entrapped? Only
Okay,
God
right.
knows.
So now let us move on. We okay. So now we are going to look at the military leaders who have said enough is enough. Our resources, our everything has been taken by foreigners while we are suffering. So we have got Traore, And we have got I've forgotten the name of the
Go-
two gentlemen.
Goita
The
in Mali,
Yes,
uh, and then Tiani in Niger.
Niger and the Chad
But
president
Idris
Idris.
Eka.
Okay, now, so let us talk about these four guys because they have formed their own alliance. But it does not seem that that alliance encompasses the rest, because you have to remember the rest of the countries there, um, Nigeria, not Nigeria, Guinea,
Cameroon.
and Cameroon, and even Sudan. Actually, Sudan is in the Sahel. According to the map, even I saw the map going all the way to Eritrea. But okay, that is not what we are discussing here. Please, now, if earlier on I was talking to Alex, and I said, well, there is a whole lot of confusion. People are supporting military leaders. Does that mean that those countries favor military leaders than civilians? So the floor is yours, Alex. Now you are
Thank
wrong.
you. Right. Okay. It's quite simple. Okay. And if you look at the fact within, let's say, West Africa, and West Africa as a unit, they had an organization called ECOWA. And ECOWA was created in 1975 to ensure that within that region, we have integration of the population, business between countries, cooperation between countries, and also all these countries can address development. But after 50 years, we've are sorry to say that the if you look at what has been achieved, is very, very little. Now, the reason why we are having within that Western African countries military rising up, we need to realize that first of all, it's not the first time militaries are taking responsibilities to ensure that the country is put in order. I'm gonna just take you a few examples. The first one will be the former president of Ghana, Jerry John Rawlings. Rawlings was a military, and Ghana went through different issues. But as a military, he needed to do something, and he took responsibility, and he made a coup in the 80s. Okay, and after 20 years, after today, if we look at Ghana today, let's look at why and how Ghana managed to be stable and reliable country today. But it's based, if you look at the fact, it's based on the work done under rulings. He rules in the 80s and in the 90s. In 92, Rawlings government set up a new constitution, and then he resigned from the military and he became a civilian. And he went to election and he won against the civilians. So he had a mandate up to 2000. And since 2000, he retired. And when he retired, his party even won the election after he retired. But to cut it in short, you see Ghana today, they had election, there's no issues, and the country is stable. Now, if you look at the French-speaking countries, we've had election in different in all these different countries like Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina, Niger. But up till today, these people we call president of these countries are not really the leaders of this country because they're all controlled by France regime. They are all puppet of France. If you remember, in 2011, we had a major crisis in Ivory Coast where the French army openly attacked and intervene militarily to remove the elected president and put into place somebody who is the puppet. And these examples have given bad precedence to what was going on. That's why in Mali, after going through what I've just described earlier, the military took the responsibility, and then it followed by Burkina and then the Niger. Now, if you look at the last 4 or 5 years since Mali, things changed in Mali. They are making serious progress. And
Okay,
I'm
we will
just
come back. We will come
going
back
to
to you.
ask you guys to,
Yeah.
yeah, to look at the
Sorry to.
fact. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
reason why military are coming back is because those who are considered politicians have failed. They've
Okay.
failed.
All right.
And
We will
if
come
you look
back.
at countries like,
We will come back. I want
all
to.
right,
I want to. I want to. I want Temi to tell us because Nigeria went through so many military coups and stuff. Because you guys, you have got an experience of what to be led by military leader. Well, you in Uganda, when military leaders take over, some of them they're not really educated. They don't understand anything. Rawlings was an exception. So tell me, according to you, these military leaders, because you have got an experience on this, you can actually talk about this. What do you think these guys they might achieve?
Okay. The worst of a civilian administration is better than the best of a military administration. As far as we are practicing liberal Western democracy, we can say without any doubt that the worst of a civilian government is better than the best of a military administration. The reason is because under civilian administration, there is constitution that is operated and there is a rule of law. The rule of law is normally, or democracy is normally suspended under the military rule. So that is the number one fact. You know, the fact is that uh, we are still the continent is still a young continent, and we are trying to find our own form of governance that will suit us. But regardless of that, there are certain fundamentals that must be achieved in order for us to say that everybody is uh, enjoying all for us to have our own kind of democracy. You understand? Now, I went to school under a military dictatorship, and that's why it's called military dictatorship. We were afraid of saying things, we were afraid of doing certain things. Of course, people can go about doing what they like. I'll give a classic example. Uh, Myself and Mr. J were in Libya when brother leader was still there, and we went and we had a nice meal. They picked us up from the airport. Everything was nice. I said, "Oh, this is the best place you could ever live in because we've not caused any trouble." Only for us on the day we were supposed to travel, they stopped our flight. They said we are going to go and see the brother leader. And all our flight was suspended. Nobody could leave. They have our passport. And that was when I knew the beauty of democracy. Because at that point, there was no democracy. They've taken our passport. They're taking us to brother leader. What about if they decide that brother JJ and me we are spies of the British government and they want to deal with us? There was nothing we could do. That is the difference between military rule and civilian rule. And of course, there's always good, bad, and ugly of military rule. So in Nigeria, we had the good ones, like Moritala that was killed, assassinated, and people felt he was a good leader. We had the one that handed over to Obasanjo, which was the last military. He handed over power. Now, if these guys have come in and said, we'll spend 2 years, put back the civilian structure, make sure corruption is reduced, make sure bad people that have abused the system are banned from politics, then that would have been fine. What we are seeing and the trend that is going on is a similar trend that we have in Nigeria, where they come in, do say they go to go back into the barracks, but instead they drop their khaki and put on civilian uniform. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is hypocrisy at the highest level.
Okay, so yeah, well, Assimi Goita, he has just assigned himself 5 years again in power.
Yes.
So originally it was that he's going to be there for 3 years, and then he will hand over to civilian rule. But let me, Alex, do you take Temitope's point that as much as civilian democracy, it has got its own inconsistencies, but it seems to be perfect for the citizens of whichever country or African countries is. Because look, if you take for example Egypt, we cannot. Egyptians are actually really, 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 really suffering, but they can't actually come up and say these things, you know, because the guy, since he took power, that's it. It is him, and everything it has to come from him. So, but what do you think that these military leaders? Okay, are you in support of military leadership or civilian rule, Alex?
Thank you very much, Joseph. What I need to ensure that people are aware of is about what a leader, regardless of his background, whether military or civilian, what would be his legacy? How will he improve the living standards of a population? Whether he spent 5 or 10 years in power, he should be he should be only be judged based on these facts. And if you look at what's happening currently in Africa, first of all, we really need to be very careful. Personally, I've looked at what is so called democracy. Even if you take here within Europe, there's no model of democracy where we can go and say, let's use this one or this one. Let me just give you a few examples. If you take Spain, Spain has its own ways of governance. They have still a king, and then they have a parliament. If you go to Italy, they still have a different system. You go to France, France has its own system. And if you look at closely, all these systems are different. The bottom line is how a population or a country can manage its own affairs to ensure that the population needs are met in terms of housing, in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of security, and so on and so forth. As long as these key human rights facts and elements are, you know, achieved or covered by the system, I have no problem with it. But don't jump to say that, oh, military are bad or
Okay.
civilians are bad. I can give example. Ivory Coast, like Nigeria, these are very, very rich countries naturally. But today, look at Nigeria, how the population is living there. Look at what these different leaders have, what the change that are brought in. It's the same for Ivory Coast. If you take Ivory Coast, I mean, I went to school to Ivory Coast, I went to university in Ivory Coast, and we knew that when you look at naturally, we were better off than other countries. But today, if you look at the living standards in those supposedly better off countries, it has gone down.
Okay.
And today, what is happening in Mali and in Burkina, I've been on different TV panels to have, I mean, to have some discussions. And in 1928, we are discussing the issue in Mali, and I was really sad to see that because a country need to do, there are key things a country need to do. And Mali in 2018 wasn't capable of doing it as a country. But since the military came in, and not only in Mali, but even in Burkina, if you look at the last few years of governance of the military government, they've been addressing the key issues facing the population in terms of education, in terms of housing, in terms of food, agriculture, how to improve, the food the country can produce for its population. A country which is not capable of producing enough food for its population is a failure. And then health. Now, when you look at all these key sectors, of course, we're talking about democracy. Yes, these are areas in Europe or America, they try to make sure that the population is not too much suffering on that. But look at all these African countries. Nigeria, who is very, very rich. If you look at these sectors and look at the population, look at Ivory Coast today, and you look at housing or agriculture or health. When people go to hospital, what the state does or what structure is in place for an ordinary citizen to go to hospital, any hospital in the country, and
Alex,
receive support. Yes.
Alex,
So
I
it's
want
just
to, I just want
Can,
to
let me
can I
just
respond.
just say?
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Can
Tell
I
me.
just say something? I am in total support for us to have a debate and conversation about the kind of democracy that we really believe Africa desire. Will it be a mixture of military, civilian, or a mixture of a triple approach, which will be military, civilian, and traditional rulers? And that was what I said before. As a student of politics over 30 years ago, I was taught about justice from Socrates. And he said a man went to his neighbor's house and asked his neighbor to lend him his cutlass and promised to return the cutlass back the next day. Now, when the when he went back for his cutlass the next day, he was now a madman and he was asking for his cutlass. Now, that neighbor had to make a quick decision. Should I hand over this cutlass to this madman, knowing full well that he will not only use it to chop my head, but he will use it against the society itself? So, justice is what we determine to be justice. As far as I'm concerned, I believe that these African countries that we're talking about right now, the people have suffered. Nigerian people are suffering, variants are suffering because of poor leadership, because of lack of proper infrastructure. But I don't think the military is the right way because there are certain fundamentals that I believe myself and Mr. Alex will agree to. Right to human rights, you know, human rights, right to be able to stand up and say, I want to be elected. As we speak right now, if we say we want to go to Mali to go and start leading a protest against the junta, they will use the military to not only just suppress us, but to even put us on firing squad if they have the opportunity. Why that will not happen in a civilian atmosphere, they will have to go to the court to be able to do it. That's what I'm saying. Let's put down the fundamentals. Even if we want the military involved, let's start asking ourselves what is the better approach, the better democracy, or define democracy in an African way, which might be a triple approach of having both traditionalists, the military, and the civilians involved in governance and making sure that people are able to have 3 square meal. You know, you talked about over 7 million people displaced because of war. Sudan, as we speak right now, there are two fractions of military fighting against themselves, you know, and this has military that are meant to be protecting the country. Rather, they are fighting among themselves for power. So the military also have their, all these African leaders, whether they be military, whether they be civilians, are all corrupt, politically corrupt, if I could use that word, and they are not fit for government.
Okay.
That's as far as I understand.
Yeah, yeah. So, uh, this is how I see it. Two things that I see. The military rulers, first of all, they don't have any experience in civil society. Can anyone agree with me or no?
I believe they
Can I
don't.
speak? Can I say
No,
something?
no, no, wait. I'm coming. I'm coming.
Okay, okay.
Secondly, they
Hmm.
actually believe what they are doing when they take over power because they see how the country is governed, and maybe they don't earn enough salary, and they can't drive nice cars, and they believe, okay, if we take over we will change things. But in order to change the situation, someone has to have a knowledge of political science. Now, political science in the military, I don't think it is applied. So go on, Alex.
Thank you very much. Let me quickly just clarify something.
Mm,
We need to be, open-minded and look for our own system. We can name it the way we want it, but not democracy.
Yep.
Because the word democracy, like I said earlier, different countries use their own system and they call it whatever democracy or whatever they want. Now, if you take the word today, look at China. In the 80s, when we were still at school and 90s, China is part of the third world countries. And this is things we learn in school.
Yeah.
In 2022, 2025 today, where is China? China is probably the most powerful country on earth economically. China still have one party system, and China has a system where I watched one um, professor of Chinese studies. He said the system of China is meritocracy, is much better than democracy. And he explained that from the village, from a village in China to select the rulers of the village,
yeah,
they will look at the best citizen of the village. Okay? And then among themselves, if they have two or three best one, they will select the one who is the top. And from then the region, they look at the region, who are the best, who have contributed, who are contributing to improve the conditions of the population. And they do this at all levels. Now, when it comes to the national level, they do have the party meetings, and they select the leader who is in place for 10 years. Okay? Look at China today. From the 80s, 90s, 20s, look at where China is today. China is at the top there economically. The Chinese have been able to raise the standard of millions per year. I don't have the figures right now here, but that was a target they set themselves to make sure that Chinese are improving the living standard. And today, they're almost there. They
yeah.
are
One,
almost there. So we Africans, let me
yeah.
just finish with this. We African, like we are experiencing right now, I mentioned if we take West Africa, for 50 years we have ECOWAS, who is a regional organization. But ECOWAS has had failed. ECOWAS has badly failed. I take why as one example.
You got to
Mali
move
was
quick.
invaded.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Mali was invaded. The terrorism activity were crippling the country, similar to Burkina. ECOWAS, as a group of 15 countries, were not able to say, we are in that union to be able to help each other, to assist each other. What can we do to help all these Malians being attacked, villages being destroyed in Burkina? Nothing happened for
Okay. All right.
years.
Okay.
But
Okay. Okay.
ECOWAS,
Okay. Correct. Now, We are going to talk about Traore. Nothing else. We are not going to talk about anyone else. We are going to talk about Traore. As we know, Traore has has ignited probably everybody who is African. I don't like using the word black. Now, Traore, but also I see that among ourselves, we as Africans or people of African origin, there is a lot of hypocrisy going on here. When Sudanese, when Eritreans, when Tigrayans, and everywhere else they are suffering, nobody pays any attention. So why Traore? Everybody now is coming up. Okay, I support Traore. Up to a limit though, because it looks like now the internet is awash with fake videos about Traore. Now, in your opinion, Alex, now let me start with you. What do you think? What do you think that this guy will achieve? Because the pressure is upon him. They want him to do good. I'm watching and I'm looking at the media, and what is very surprising, when you go to Burkina Faso media, you don't see anything about Traore, not even in the newspapers. So tell me, what do you think that is?
Thank you very much. Okay. Again, this is we are here to exchange views and see
Yeah,
how
yeah,
things are progressing.
absolutely.
If I look at Traore in Burkina Faso, before Traore, let me remind you that we had another leader, Thomas Sankara, who led Burkina for just 4 years. And within 4 years, what he achieved within 4 years, many leaders who have been in power for over 20 years couldn't achieve that. And Sankara, unfortunately, was taken away because he was disrupting, or those who were controlling the country were threatened to lose the grip on Burkina. That's why they got rid of Sankara. In Traore, and many people can see, many comments, analysts have spoken, Traore is like the incarnation of Sankara. He came in through a military coup, and within 2 years he's been there. Just look at the actions. And that's why I always say in politics, it's about how you improve the conditions of your population. That's the, that, that's the bottom line. In terms of what Traore has achieved within 2 3 years is massive. You know, first of all, he came in where the country was almost invaded and also controlled by terrorists. But these terrorists have somewhere to get these resources they get from. And Traore came up with an idea. They recruited more, even civilians, to join the military to help fight. Because for a country to move forward, without security, there's nothing which can be done. As a result, many young Burkinabe move into that policy, accepted, went to be trained. So they have more defense forces, and they were addressing the security issues. Now, if you look at from 22 he came into now, how many territories, how many areas controlled by the terrorists which are now under government control? If you look at education, schools were closed, hospitals were closed. Since he came in, look at what has been done and how things are progressing in the country. If you look at this country I mentioned earlier, they all have gold. They produce all gold from Mali, Burkina, Niger. None of these countries had gold reserve. If you look at on the internet, you see that countries who have the highest or the most gold reserve on earth We don't even have gold mine in these countries. You know, how come we African we have the resources in our lands, don't have these resources in our reserve? And Traore made a policy to try to ensure that Burkina can have its own gold reserve. And as you know, when you're talking about finance, the key thing is about gold because that's what everything you rely on. Now he had to look at the policies and then improve the policies about the gold miners from different countries operating in the country. And this happened previously with other government, like the former president of Tanzania. He took such example, and he took that steps to ensure that the resources of Tanzania benefit the Tanzanian people. So Traore, the reason why, I mean, that's one example I can take because
Yeah,
many
because
other things
we
are
need to move on. We have got only 5 minutes
exactly.
to finish.
The
Yeah.
reason why he has become, like you said, an internet sensation is because an American general who's leading, head of AFRICOM, came out, went to the American Senate, and made allegations which all turned to be false. And Traore himself responded to that general. He made it clear that, first of all, Traore is not stealing any gold. The gold he's trying to, the gold reserve he's trying to build within his country is for the country.
Okay, okay,
So
okay,
an
okay. So
American,
yeah,
yes.
Le-
Now,
right.
just to
Yeah,
cut it short, to
yeah.
make sure that he can progress, because again, this is one thing any human being, any person who become adult should not forget. It's about his own security. Okay? In the 50s, 60s, we had another leader called Fidel Castro.
No, no, we can't go.
Fidel-
We can't go.
no, no,
We
no.
need.
It's just an
No, no.
example.
We need to go to Temi. We need to. We have got only
Okay.
3 minutes.
So
Yeah,
it's just
we need him
it's
to finish. Okay, Temi.
Yes, sir.
Look. You see, this young man here. First of all, he's young. He's 36 years old. If you were to advise him, what kind of advice would you give him in running the country?
I know he's not the Messiah that everybody think he is. There's no doubt about it. But there's no doubt also that he's trying to do a lot for his people, and
Mhm.
people are recognizing that. If is brought if is try and use civilians to fight the war, so they come together to fight that war. But the bottom line is that there's also allegation of human rights abuses. Again, is moving away from the west to Russia. We know that Russians' hands are not clean anyway. Every one of them is like moving from fry pan to fire. But the bottom line is that Russia is only interested in what they will get. They are not interested in interfering in his political, or just like China, they are not interested in interfering in domestic issues, unlike the West that like to interfere in domestic issues. And whether we like it or not, the population are not happy with with the French government in the way in which things were done in the past. So there is a background to this issue. But if I was going to advise him, it would have been better that he kept to his 3 years timeline that he had before. So let's say ensure that he puts in place a effective structure to move the country forward, and then back off from politics and hand over to a civilian. But from the look of it, he's going to be there for 5 years. And if I could give a political prophecy, as he's getting close to the 5 years, he's going to remove his uniform and he's going to become a civilian president. That is what is grappling, and that is what happens with each and every one of them. The bottom line is, as much as he's doing good, there is always an hidden agenda behind it, and that is where the problem is with them. There's no doubt that he's doing some good things, But the bottom line is that, just like Mr. Alex said, let's look for our own type of democracy, and let's be honest about it and say, this civilian rule using liberal Western democracy is not working for us. Let's find an approach that we can adopt. But for him to be hypocritical in his approach, to say that I'm doing this for the people, but behind the scene, people stand up and say, "Oh, we want you to be there for 5 years." Say, "Oh, look, they want me to be there for 5 years, so I'm going to be there for 5 years." No, you should have said right there, "No, I'm not accepting this uh, anointing that you are anointing me. I'm going to live in 3 years, and I'm going to put the proper structure in place." That's what he should have done.
Okay.
That's my
So,
belief.
gentlemen, you know what? I think we are learning. Man, you know what makes me happy right now?
Yeah.
The Africans in the diaspora. We are arriving at something. Look at us here now. We are discussing democratically. I might not agree with your point. I will take it, and if I understand it, fine. You see, this is what we are talking about when we talk about democracy. It doesn't have to be the word democracy. It is misunderstood by so many, even here, even where we live. But gentlemen, thank you very much for it makes me happy. Believe me, you don't know how I'm feeling because right now this is what we need. We have come to the West, we have learned. I keep saying that if the governments, African governments, could give us a chance to go back home and share what we have learned, things, man, will move. Because we've got managers, we've got now we are running our own media, we make our own decisions. People need to see this. But the challenge is that those guys are engrossed in their own problems. They are trying to solve the problems where they don't have any, they don't know the solutions. But yet the people from the diaspora, I'm sure they can. They can. So next time, but let me round this. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have been watching Alex Akoman and Temitope Olodo. As I've just said, it makes me happy to see Africans. Actually, now we are doing things ourselves. You can hear these guys, they have got the knowledge, they can discuss on any level. One day, my dream is that I want these guys to meet the people from the African Union, because these guys, they will be able to put questions that even the African Union, they will have to think twice before they answer. Now, next time we are going to be talking about Traore. Today has been just a tester. You might disagree with the guy's views and whatever, but that's what we call democracy. I can agree with you or I can disagree with you, but it does not mean that I'm going to be your enemy. No, things don't work like that. So, whether you are for democracy, whether you are for military, that is understandable. Everyone has got a choice. So, on that note, I must say thank you very much for watching. We will be back again when these guys get their time. They are busy. They are busy people. I am very fortunate to have them here. Well, look, man, I'm rambling on because I am happy. Until next time, ciao.